We live in a world where everyone seems to be racing against the clock. Before 25, you're expected to have a degree, a business, a dream job, a six-pack, and maybe even a mansion with a pool. By 30, society whispers, if you're not rich, married, and driving a Tesla, you've failed. But here's the truth. This pressure isn't real. It's a trap. And if you're feeling crushed by it, you're not alone. The Stoics faced this same pressure in their own way, and their wisdom still cuts through the noise today. Before we dive into it, if you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe. It supports this channel and keeps this Stoic journey alive. Now let's talk about how Stoicism teaches us to break free from this race against time. Number 1, the illusion of society's timeline. We grow up surrounded by invisible deadlines. Graduate by 22. Be successful by 25. Be stable by 30. These numbers are drilled into us, not because they reflect reality, but because society loves comparing lives like it's some kind of Olympic event. The problem? Everyone is running a different race, on a different track, with different shoes. No wonder so many people feel exhausted before they even reach the finish line. Stoicism reminds us that time is not our enemy, it's our ally. Marcus Aurelius never wrote, by 30, you must conquer the Roman Empire. Instead, he wrote about controlling your mind, your actions, and your attitude. The Stoics focused on how you live, not when you achieve. To them, success was measured in virtue, not in milestones. Think about it. Do you really want your life to be a checklist of deadlines? Or do you want it to be a journey where growth, resilience, and peace define success? Stoicism whispers the answer. Stop racing against the clock and start aligning with your values. And here's the humor in it. If society's timeline was correct, then Socrates, who didn't really start shaking Athens until his later years, would be considered a failure. Can you imagine telling Socrates, sorry man, you're 40 and still barefoot in the streets? You really need to get your life together. Number 2, redefining success through Stoicism. Stoicism flips the definition of success on its head. While modern culture says success is about money, followers, and fame, the Stoics believe success was simply this: living with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. That's it. No mansion required. Epictetus, who was once a slave, had every reason to feel behind in life. But he didn't waste energy comparing himself to Roman nobles. Instead, he focused on what was in his control, his character. And because of that, his teachings are still alive today, long after the names of the successful Romans of his time were forgotten. This teaches us something powerful. You might not have the perfect job or dream house before 30, but if you're learning to control your reactions, to stay calm under pressure, and to act with integrity, you're more successful than most people chasing status symbols. Let's be honest, having 6 figures in your bank account is great, but having peace of mind, that's priceless. And between the two, guess which one is harder to keep? Number 3, the trap of comparison. The biggest weight we carry is comparison. You see some of your age buying a house, getting married, or building a business, and suddenly you feel behind. But Stoicism asks, behind in what? Behind according to who? Life is not a race with universal checkpoints. It's your path, and no two paths are the same. Seneca wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Most of the pressure you feel isn't real, it's imagined. It's your brain playing tricks, convincing you that because someone else has achieved something, you're less worthy. But their story isn't yours. Their timeline isn't yours. You're comparing different books as if they're chapters in the same story. Stoics would say, focus on your lane. You don't look at a tree and say, this oak should hurry up, the pine next to it is taller. You accept that nature grows at its own pace. Humans are no different. Here's the funny side. Imagine Marcus Aurelius scrolling through Instagram in his palace. Oh great, this guy just conquered a province at 27. I'm such a failure. It sounds ridiculous, but that's what we do to ourselves every day. Number 4, practicing detachment from the timeline. The Stoic practice of detachment is about freeing yourself from the obsession with outcomes. Instead of asking, "Am I successful yet?" ask, "Am I acting with virtue today?" That's a better compass. The pressure disappears when you realize that the timeline was never real. It was just borrowed from others. Practically, this means recentering yourself on daily habits, not distant milestones. Wake up and ask, like Marcus Aurelius did, "What good shall I do today?" That's Stoic success. Each day becomes a victory when you live it with presence and discipline. And here's the liberating part. When you detach for the timeline, you stop fearing failure. You realize that missing a milestone doesn't mean your life is collapsing. It just means your story is unfolding differently. Think of life as cooking. Some meals are ready in 10 minutes. Some take hours to simmer. Both can taste amazing. Stoicism simply reminds you, don't rush your recipe. Number 5, living beyond 30, the long view. The Stoics encourage us to zoom out. Why panic about turning 30 when life could stretch far beyond that? If you live to 70, then 30 isn't the finish line, it's the warm-up lap. Pressuring yourself to have it all before then is like trying to finish a marathon in the first mile. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about seeing life as a bigger whole. In that bigger picture, what matters isn't the age at which you achieve something, but the person you are while you achieve it. What's the point of becoming rich at 25 if you're miserable, or famous at 28 if you lose yourself in the process? A Stoic success story isn't about how quickly you get there, but how deeply you live along the way. Real peace doesn't care about birthdays or deadlines. It cares about your ability to live with dignity and strength in each passing moment. And let's be real, there's no magical switch at 30 that says, "Game over." If anything, life gets more interesting. You have more perspective, more resilience, and hopefully fewer questionable fashion choices. The pressure to make it before 30 is an illusion. What matters is that you keep becoming, not that you rush to finish. Number 6, pressure comes from ego, not reality. At the root of this pressure to make it before 30 is ego. The Stoics constantly warned against it. Your ego whispers, "If I don't succeed early, I'll look like a failure. People will laugh at me." But ego is a liar. It exaggerates everything. Reality is usually far kinder than your imagination. Most people are too busy worrying about themselves to keep track of your timeline. Epictetus taught that the only true failure is losing your integrity. You can fail at business, fail at love, even fail at figuring out what to do with your life by 29, and still live a great life if you don't fail yourself. That's the real Stoic standard. Think about it. A broken plan doesn't break you. It only breaks your ego. And sometimes, breaking your ego is the most freeing thing that can happen. Because only when you stop caring about how the world sees you, can you actually start living authentically. And let's be honest, half the people you think are judging you are just wondering what to eat for dinner. Your ego gives them way too much credit. Number 7, the discipline of patience. The Stoics valued patience as much as courage. They knew that great things take time. The oak tree doesn't apologize for taking years to grow. The river doesn't feel behind when it takes centuries to carve valleys. Why should you rush your becoming? Seneca often wrote about time being the most precious resource. If you waste it by rushing, you rob yourself of the very process that shapes you. Patience is not laziness, it's wisdom. It's knowing that rushing leads to shallow roots, but patience builds resilience that lasts. For example, some of the greatest thinkers, leaders, and creators in history didn't reach their peak until well after 30. Age wasn't the obstacle, it was the foundation. Their wisdom needed time to mature, just like yours does. Here's a bit of humor. If you put bread in the oven and take it out after 2 minutes because you're impatient, you don't get bread, you get dough with trust issues. Life works the same way. Number 8, focusing on process over outcomes. One of the most liberating Stoic practices is shifting your focus from results to process. We get anxious because we obsess over when will I succeed. Instead, Stoicism says, focus on what you can do today, right now. Marcus Aurelius didn't spend his mornings worrying if history would call him great. He woke up asking how he could serve Rome with justice and wisdom that day. He knew the future was uncertain, but his actions in the present were always within his control. When you focus on process, pressure fades. You're no longer chasing an imaginary deadline. You're building consistency. That's what creates real momentum. You may not see instant results, but each day of discipline stacks up like bricks. Eventually, you've built something solid without even noticing. And let's face it, outcomes can lie. Someone might look successful at 28, but miserable inside. The process never lies. If your daily actions align with your values, you're already winning. Number 9, accepting the uncontrollable. The Stoics remind us constantly, there are things we can control and things we cannot. The age at which success arrives, not always in your control. Opportunities, timing, luck, these are external. What's in your control is your effort, your mindset, and your response to challenges. Epictetus said, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. That's not giving up, it's freedom. It means you don't waste energy fighting the current. You adjust your sails and keep moving. When you stop demanding that life obey your timeline, you release the pressure. You accept that things may come later, earlier, or differently than expected, and that's okay. Life rarely follows our script, but it often gives us the lessons we need. For a little humor, imagine trying to tell nature, hey rain, I really need you to fall on my farm by Tuesday, 3 p.m. before I turn 30. Nature doesn't care about your deadlines, and neither does life. The Stoics knew this, and that's why they stayed calm. Number 10, true legacy has no deadline. Finally, the Stoics remind us that success before 30, or any age, is irrelevant compared to the legacy you leave. Legacy isn't about wealth or fame. It's about how your life echoes in the lives of others. And the truth is, legacy doesn't have an expiration date. Socrates didn't chase early success. He lived by his principles, even when it cost him his life. And yet, his influence still shapes the world today. No one asks, did Socrates succeed by 30? They ask, what did he stand for? That's the Stoic measure of greatness. The beauty is, you don't need to be rich or famous to leave a legacy. Every act of kindness, every moment of wisdom, every piece of integrity you practice, it ripples out. Sometimes more than you realize. That's success beyond any deadline. So, the next time you feel the weight of not being successful enough before 30, remember the Stoics. Remember that your worth isn't tied to a timeline, but to your character. Success is not a race, it's a practice. It's living each day with wisdom, courage, and peace. If this message spoke to you, give this video a like, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom, and share it with someone who feels crushed by this same pressure. Because at the end of the day, the race you're running is your own. And the Stoics would tell you, that's more than enough.